Hey guys, Chairman here. Welcome to a new series of weiss videos that I'm starting that I like to call play by play. So I make a lot of deck profiles on this channel. I love building decks, but one thing I do understand is that some of my deck profiles might not be the most conventional or like standard meta decks. And so I think some players might have a difficult time, especially if you're new to the game, to kind of understand how my decks work, how you would play them, especially if they're using some kind of unorthodox strategy or combo that I particularly like and I'm trying to show off. So this new series is going to focus on demonstrating how to play these decks, not just at a certain point in the game, but from beginning to end, hopefully to shed some light as to kind of the approach that I would take personally as the deck builder, and how I would play these decks. Obviously for other games it's a lot easier to show this, but for weiss, because games are so long, you kind of have to dedicate an entire video for that kind of demonstration. So this is going to be a new series to demonstrate that. And so I will be shadow testing with a deck that I have built on camera from beginning to end, and kind of talk through my choices and demonstrate just how I would just practice with these decks at home, kind of like the process I would go through. Especially when you're shadow playing, you can go through a game much quicker than if you were playing against an actual opponent. Now, one thing that a lot of people kind of don't understand when it comes to shadow testing is how do you determine how much damage to take, right? Because that is a very big aspect of the game, just how much damage you're taking per turn. And that, you know, whether your opponent plays a climax or not, what kind of deck they're playing, just would completely change up, I guess, the dynamic of how much damage you're taking. And the simple answer is that it's random. So it actually doesn't matter, right? Damage isn't really relevant because it's random. You have no idea, you have no control over what your opponent does. So you just kind of arbitrarily choose some numbers to take. And that's just kind of how you play the game, right? Obviously, if you're new to the game, that is not very helpful because you have no idea how to randomly choose these numbers, right? And so because of that, there's actually another technique that I like to use. And this is also very helpful if you want to try to simulate testing against a specific kind of deck, is to just have a second deck available. So in this case, I have the second review deck available, and I'm just going to shuffle it up, and I'm going to leave it on to the side. And when I'm simulating damage, all I'm going to do is reveal damage triggers from the top of this deck, and that will be the damage that my opponent deals to me. And of course, if you want to simulate climax, just add 1 to all the values. And yeah, generally speaking, you can just decide like when do most decks want to play a climax. Just use a climax on that turn. So like first turn at level 1, and then maybe wait a turn and then have them play a climax again, just to simulate how much damage you'd be taking from climax combos. And obviously if you're trying to play against a standby deck, then you would have a lot of standbys. You have a standby deck here with a lot of standby triggers. I like the review deck a lot because it's a pants door. So it's 4 climaxes with triggers, 4 climaxes without triggers. So it's kind of like a good mix between that. So the damage should be pretty average over the course of a game. Right, and then obviously in terms of your own board, whether they live or die, just generally think about, does the board generally live or die, right? You want to be testing for like the worst case scenario. So generally speaking, I will like let my entire board die, unless it's a card that I'm specifically testing to like, okay, this is a big card, it's probably not likely to die, then I'll just leave it alive. And then some games I'll just test and I'll just kill all my board anyways, just to see how the deck responds to when my opponent is able to deal with my board every single turn. Alright, with that out of the way, since this is the first episode, inaugural episode of Play by Play, I figured what better deck to show off than the deck I took to Worlds. So this is the Standby Meliodas deck. As you can see, it's all sorted here, and we're just gonna shuffle it up and begin our testing. Yeah, so generally speaking, if you have a completely sorted deck, you would want to shuffle it quite a lot. The number with a 50 card deck is 7 riffle and 7 overhand. Unfortunately, riffling expensive weiss cards is not really a good idea, so you kind of have to do several more of these mashes and make sure you weave in some cuts. Otherwise, you know, some of the cards that are on the bottom will never be truly interspersed through the rest of the deck. And you just do this for like a minute or so before you're pretty comfortable with the shuffle. Alright, and then deciding whether or not you go first. You have these handy going first, going second cards. Just kind of don't look at them for a bit. And whichever one ends up on top is what you're testing. And obviously if you're testing, you can start with 1, which is going first, and then you can just test the other one later, right? So we're gonna go first for this game. Let's just put it right here, going first. All right, so going first, we're gonna draw 5 cards. And let's take a look. Okay, already this is a pretty good hand for the Standby Meliodas deck. We really like to see the Elaine, and we want to see the Elaine level 0 as well. And all this hand is really missing. We also have a standby target. This is actually a great turn 1 standby. So all we're missing is another red card to clock for color, as well as the climax. So we're going to keep these 2 because these can help us get to those cards. We're going to discard these 3 and draw 3. So 1, we got the climax. That's really good. We don't have a red card to clock though, which is a little bit concerning, but we can still potentially play around that. Alright, so we're going first, draw for turn. Alright, so at this point, unfortunately, we do not have a red card to clock, which means that we will have to clock this Elaine. Because we want to play the standby turn 1 for sure, and this is the only real way to do it. So we're going to clock the Elaine, and we're going to draw 2 cards. Oh, nice, we drew another Elaine. That's actually super good. So now, we can standby the 1/1 out really easily, but we want to get a 2/2 into the waiting room so that we can at least get a +1 off of the brainstormer. So we're gonna start off with this card. In this case, since we already have the climax in hand, I don't want to do the reveal top first, because just in case it's a climax, I want to be able to brainstorm it away. So I'm gonna actually use the discard here first. We have a lot of this Rico, we can always get more later, so I'm gonna go ahead discard character to draw. Okay, and then we're gonna reveal. It's a 1/1, we're going to add it to hand, and then we're going to discard it. And here, we're definitely going to use the Elaine, and we're going to use the Brainstorm effect, sacking this Elaine level 0, and brainstorming 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice, we hit a 2/2, which is really good. That means that our Elaine is going to give us a +1 in terms of hand advantage, and then we also can top check 3, add 1. So if we hit another 2/2 here, it's actually going to be really good, because we can potentially get +2 off the bat here. So top check up to 3. Okay, nothing too good here. The 1/1 bond is good in the waiting room, so we're probably going to leave that there. I'm actually going to, between these 2, I'm actually going to take the climax swap king here. The bond is usually for specific matchups, and we don't really need it too much, but the king is going to allow us to top check 2 next turn, and then also if we draw the wrong climax, we can always swap back to the right climax that we have in our hand and also in our waiting room. So here we could do one of 2 things. We could either play the Meliodas Rico and get some top check information, or we can play the Escanor. Now, I like to play the Meliodas Rico here because if the top card of our deck is a climax, we can go ahead and salvage the second copy of our Elaine and use the brainstorm there to get us even more advantage. So we're gonna just go ahead and do just that. And we can always, it doesn't really matter what we discard because we can always salvage it. So I'm going to discard the Escanor, reveal the top card of our deck. It is not the a climax, but it actually is a 2/2, which means that if we use the Elaine, if we salvage the Elaine here and we brainstorm by killing the Meliodas, we will actually have a second 2/2 to salvage off with the Elaine here, which I'm feeling pretty good actually. I think that's a good play, especially since we do have a third level 0 card here, so we can really pop off on our first turn here. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna send the Meliodas. We're gonna brainstorm one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. We hit. That's perfect, which means we don't minus, and we're gonna top check 3 here. So 1. Wow, that's another 1. So how many are we out? We're already out 3, but I think we can just keep going further because we're first deck. So unfortunately, we did get a climax we don't want. I'm actually considering keeping this in our hand and maybe swapping it the following turn, but we're probably gonna standby out the 1/1 runner, and if we're standby out the 1/1 runner, then we might not have the stock to swap. Although what we could do is actually add the climax and then standby out the 1/1 bond, and then so that's probably not going to die because it's going to be really big. And then the following turn we'll have a stock that we can use to swap into the right climax. So let's do that actually. Especially since we're this far in and we have both back row. We don't want to stand out the runner because usually I like to stand out the runner to the back row, and then then we can run it to the front row if it's going to save a character. But in this case we kind of don't really care. So we're going to go ahead and play the Meliodas again, Let's actually discard the king just to get it back, because I want to have this card just in case I need to clock it for a color. So discard the king here, reveal to level 0. We can add the king back. And we can just play the climax here. Both Elaine's trigger. We will go ahead and add 2 copies of Bond mid-match squabble to our hand, and we will be able to standby out the 1/1 Bond to the field. So this is pretty good for turn 1. Now obviously we have 2 of this the 2/2 Bond, which is not ideal here, but we can use one to hand encore the 1/1, and then we also can just clock the second one to draw cards later. So let's go ahead and direct attack here. We already know what this card is. It is the Escanor, so it's going to be clean for 2 damage. Alright, so on our following turn, our opponent is probably going to attack twice. I'm doubtful that they'll attack into this lane, so they're probably going to go direct here and then front here. So let's just do that order. It's easy just to arbitrarily, randomly decide the order, so just left to right is easiest. So opponent's going to direct here. They're going to trigger for 3, so we're going to take 3 here. 1, 2, 3. Take the 3. Alright, and then afterwards we can just put this to the bottom of the deck. And then we're going to trigger for this one. They're going to trigger for 1. Take 1. Okay. And we just put this to the bottom of the deck. Alright, and then this dies. But this definitely doesn't die because our opponent is still at level 0. So we're in a good position here. Draw for turn. Okay, this is not bad. So generally speaking, we don't want to clock this until level 1. Because we want this in our level 1 clock. So that it falls into the waiting room when we hit level 2. Which means it's all prepped for our level 3 turn. So we're going to clock this instead and draw 2 cards. 1, 2. Okay, not ideal here, but it should be enough. We still have a 2/2 in the waiting room, which means we still can get a +1 off of one of our lanes. But we're going to go ahead and play the king for special summon. So before we do anything, obviously top check 2 to see what we have. We have a standby here, so we can definitely kill it to potentially brainstorm more. That's not a bad idea. I will consider doing that, and we will go ahead and also swap the climax in our hand with the climax in the waiting room. Alright, so in this case, I actually do think I want to use the Elaine to brainstorm. Just to be able to hit that climax out and potentially even refresh at level 0. That would be really, really good. And also because we're gonna move one of our Elaines to the front row as an attacker anyways this turn. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna go ahead and tap the Elaine, and we're gonna send this to waiting room, brainstorm. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We guarantee to hit. And we're going to go all the way here, hoping to get another 2/2, the last 2/2 Bond into our waiting room, so that we can salvage 2 off of the combo here. So 1, 2, and 3. Unfortunately, we did not get the last one, but we did get another Elaine revived here. That's our 3rd Elaine revive, which is quite a lot of them. Now, how many climaxes do we have left on our deck? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 2 climaxes left in our deck. Okay, not too bad here. So we potentially will be able to trigger one of them, and if we don't trigger any of them, then that means that we're likely going to cancel on our opponent's turn, which is really good. Alright, so I think in this case we do generally just want to attack 3 times just to get a lot of stock. If we trigger climaxes, then we can obviously stand by more 1/1 bonds to the front row, which is really good. And it doesn't really matter because we have this to, I guess, pay out stock if we trigger climaxes the following turn. So we're going to go ahead and use the standby. Unfortunately, there's only one 2/2 Bond in the waiting room, so I can only salvage 1, but as you can see here, we're already 6 cards in hand just on our second turn, just from playing standby. And in this case, because we can standby to the back row, we're going to go ahead and standby out the 1/1 Elizabeth. So this Elizabeth can run around and just cause a lot of pain for our opponent. So attacking here, again, we want to attack with the Bond last, because if we attack with this first, then if we trigger standby on the second attack, then it's very sad. So we're going to direct attack, or we're just going to attack here. Alright, so unfortunately we trigger standby here. How do I want to play around this? So sometimes you can consider standbying to back row over the Elaine, but unfortunately it's going to be hard to protect the Elaine without potentially losing the Elizabeth. So I don't think it's worth it to actually standby on this attack. And we still have one more climax in our deck, so that if we trigger it, we can always standby on that attack. So we're going to let this one go through. Alright, direct attack here, or whatever, there's our 2/2 Bond, and then our last attack here, and we trigger. So that's why it doesn't really matter. We're going to get the 1/1 here. And unfortunately, that means our deck is clean, so we are going to take a lot of damage here on the swing back, but that's okay because we already have a really big board built. And I know that in this matchup, let's say pretending that we're playing against Review Starlight, that they actually can't really contest our board that well. But for the sake of just practicing against an average matchup, let's just say that one of our bonds die and then the other one does live. So we're going to hand encore one of them on the following turn. So in this case, our opponent is probably going to play a climax. So we're going to increase all the soul damage of the triggers by 1 here. So the first trigger is going to be 1, 2, 3. So unfortunately, we're going to take all that damage because we're out of climaxes. All right, so here we need to level red. Unfortunately, this is the only real good level target, and that's fine. So first one, actually, let's just move them all at the end. It's probably easier. All right, here for another 3. So refreshing with 5. So obviously we could use the 1/1 to pay out the climax and run, but unfortunately in this case, I think it's just not very worth it because we're just paying out the climax, just to pay it out. But we do have our other ways we can use that stock, so I don't think it's that important to pay it out right here, especially since we can iterate through the deck really quickly. Yeah, so I'm not interested in using that stock just quite yet. All right, and then let's go ahead and take the refresh point. That's unfortunate. All right, but we do cancel on 3, which is really good. And then the third trigger is going to be for 2. So 1, 2. Cancel. Wow, that's very, very lucky. All right, so these go to the bottom of our opponent's deck. And we will hand encore one of them. We're going to go ahead and discard 2/2. This Elaine is dead, and we can untap our board. All right, so we're going to draw here. So 2/1. Oh, here we definitely going to clock the Meliodas to draw 2 cards. Okay, pretty good. Now here, since we have 1 Elaine, we can move the Elizabeth up, and this will be able to direct attack for pretty good value here. And the second thing we want to do is we want to try to pay out some of these climaxes. Now, it's a little awkward that it's 3 stock, but I think what we can do here is we can start off with the Elaine coming to her senses. And we're going to use the on-play effect to top check. Let's mill that. And there's nothing really good here that we want to salvage. Maybe like the Escanor is not a bad idea, but we're going to see if we can get something better here by brainstorming. So mill 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't hit anything. And then we can trigger the on-death effects of Elaine. There's 2 of them. So let's do the first one, which is to top check. Okay, that's actually a pretty good card that we want potentially in our hand later, but probably not now. So let's go ahead and mill that as well. And then we're going to pay 2 here to salvage one of our characters. In this case, I really want to get the level 0 Elaine for the following turn. I do want to get this one right now, but actually now that I think about it, we do have the Rico, so we can get this later. So let's just get the harder to get Elizabeth Strong Heart into hand so we can hold this for level 3, because our hand is already looking really, really good. We don't really need to do anything else here. So we can just attack 3 times here, and then if we trigger standby, we can standby the 2/2 out to the back row. I think that's pretty good. No need to really do anything. We could also play the 1/1 Elizabeth onto the board to pay out the last climax, but we use a lot of stock in this deck, and it's not a big deal that climax is buried there. We are out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 3 climaxes left in our deck here. Can we potentially mill a bit more? But it's really difficult. Like, the only way we can mill is if we use the Rico to get some kind of mill here, and I don't know if that's exactly worth it here or not. So I think with a lot of standby decks, sometimes it's just okay to attack, because we're going to win board anyways, and our opponent is going to not be able to direct attack. So it's still probably good. Even though our compression is not that good, we probably won't take that much damage next turn. And we do want to hit level 2 the following turn just so we can start doing standby stuff immediately. So let's just attack. I think that's fine. First attack for 1, second attack for 2, and third attack here for 1. Okay. So on our following turn, usually we want to use the Elizabeth if it keeps her alive. In this case, I don't think it'll keep her alive. I'm assuming that they're just going to do attacks, and we're gonna once again we're gonna keep one of the level 1s alive, and we're gonna lose the other 2. So let's go ahead and trigger. This is gonna be for 1. Trigger for 1. This is gonna be for 1. Trigger for 1. And this is going to be for 1. Trigger for 1. All right, we do level up here, but that's really good for us. Hitting us to 2-0 is actually exactly where we want to be. So let's go ahead and lose 2 of these. So do we want to encore the bond? Let me think here. Honestly, yeah, this 2-2 is not going to do anything in our hand, and so might as well discard it to encore out the bond, and it gives us 1 less card we have to worry about to play from our hand here. All right, so now we really want to see a climax, so we're definitely going to clock here. Drop. That is the wrong kind of climax, but fortunately we do have the Rico, which means we can get the climax swap. If the climax swap is not here, so we're going to have to find the climax swap here. No worries, no worries. All right, we're going to clock the 2-1 because we have 2 copies of it. We don't need the second one, and we're going to draw 2 cards. First and second. Okay, this is really good because this can potentially get us the climax that we need, as well as potentially get us to that climax swap. So let's start out with the Elaine guarding the string. We have a climax in our hand, but it's not the right one, so I'm going to reveal first. Reveal. It's not a character that we want, so we're just going to go ahead and discard it. And then we're going to discard the 1-1 to draw a card. Oh, perfect! We got the climax swap. That's huge here. That's absolutely huge. Now the question is, do we want to brainstorm, or do you want to just play it like this? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 climaxes in waiting room, 5, 6. There's 2 left in our deck. If we brainstorm, we're definitely not going to be able to put the climax back in. So I think it's actually perfectly fine to just play the king right now. And top check 2 to see if the climaxes are at the top or at the bottom. So if the top 2 are clean, then we're definitely not going to brainstorm. But if the top 2 are like 2 climaxes, then we're probably going to brainstorm. So let's see. Oh, they're clean. That's wonderful. All right, this is the perfect order. And that means that we know that the climaxes are on the bottom 5, or sorry, the bottom 5 of the deck, which means that we can't trigger more than 1. And that means that even if we do trigger 1, it's really good. And if we don't trigger any, then that's 2 cancels and we get to stay at level 2, which is really good. So let's go ahead and K1 to climax swap here. Obviously getting the combo one because we do want to get that extra bit of hand. And in this case, we're actually going to do this. So the reason why we're going to attack with the king instead of the Elaine is because the Elaine is going to go into our refresh right now. Because we're going to standby over her. But the king is probably going to go into our refresh on the following turn because this is going to be direct attacking the lane that one of our 1-1 bonds won. And by going into our new deck refresh, it's going to be in our waiting room on. After we refresh, we can use the Rico to get it on the second deck if we want it then. Because this is a 1-of, but we can always easily get this from just playing a 4-of. So play the climax combo, go ahead and salvage the 2-2. And then we're going to go standby out the 3-2 Meliodas right here. Okay, sounds pretty good. So this one obviously is going to direct attack. And so it's going to stay alive. This one's going to front for 1. And this one's going to front for 2. All right, that means that we have 2 climaxes left in our deck, which is a good time to cancel. Now, if our opponent knew that, they're probably not going to play a climax, but let's just pretend that they play a climax here. It's also, good to do like on-off turns for climaxes. That's pretty usual for like players to have that kind of play pattern. Some decks can just do climax every turn, but it's kind of hard to test against that. But let's pretend they play a climax this turn. So first trigger is going to be for 2. 1, 2. We cancel that. Pretty good. Second trigger is going to be for 3. We're probably going to cancel this one too. Yep, on the last card. So that's unfortunately not going to go back in. And we are going to be refreshing with 6 cards. Sorry, 6 climaxes. Missing, I believe, 2 of the same caught in the trap. Could be wrong though. I don't remember which standby is buried in the bottom of our stock here. Okay, refreshing here.
Bruh.
Ouch! That's the second refresh point that we've taken with the climax, which is unfortunate. And then 3 off the new deck. Can we cancel this one? Unfortunately, we cannot. But that's not too big of an issue here. All right. So in this case, we're going to pretend that all of our field dies. If your opponent's level 2, generally speaking, they will have an answer to 1-1 hand encores. So it doesn't really make sense to keep them alive for any longer at this point. We will use the 2-2 to hand encore because you know, it's just nice to have the 1/1 on board. The 2/2 is not doing anything except for being discard fodder for like the Meliodas or something on the following turn. Alright, but I think this is still a really playable hand. We're still at level 2. We have the Meliodas, we have the level support ready, or not the level support, the Meliodas support ready in our hand to play, and so I think we're actually looking really good here. So draw for a turn. So on this turn, we don't actually need a standby because we're going to play this from hand. So there's not really a big reason for us to clock, but I do want more cards in hand because the 2/1 counter that we're going to be using does require a lot of hand. So I'm still going to clock here, but just know that I'm not clocking for a climax specifically. I'm clocking just to have more cards in hand, and also maybe draw more 3/2 Meliodas. So clock, draw 2. We do draw the standby, which is actually pretty okay here because we have the Rico. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and open with the Rico, and we're going to discard the 2/1 Elizabeth sacrificing herself. We're going to go ahead and standby that out with the combo and reveal. It's a level 0, so we can salvage a level 0 from our waiting room. Go ahead and grab the climax swap. This is going to be useful the following turn to swap a standby that we draw into the choice. And so here we can go ahead and brainstorm here. So I like the idea of brainstorming here, and then we can play the Elaine. And if we have another 2/2 in the waiting room, that means we get 2 copies of that to our hand when we use the standby. So let's go ahead and do that. See if we can hit a 2/2 into the waiting room here. None off the brainstorm, but we do get a top check 3. So let's see if we can top check one of those. Nice, perfect. Oh, that's a really good ad. Do we stop there? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I believe we do not trigger. So 4. That means there's 4 climaxes left in our deck. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're looking at 4 in 15. We're pretty compressed. I actually don't think there's a reason to keep going now that we have a 2/2 and we have a really good ad off the brainstormer. So we're just gonna go ahead and add that. Now we can play the Elaine revived and go ahead and play the back from the dead. So both Elaine's proc, we can salvage 2 of the 2/2s here, and then go ahead and standby out the 2/1. So now our Meliodas is hexproof and we will not fear anything like an anti-change counter or anything like that. So one thing I am a little bit not happy about is the fact that we don't have a 1/1 runner in the waiting room here. So if we did trigger a standby here, we can't really standby this out. So maybe we could have done something to try to get this into our waiting room at this point, because it's really important to have this out to protect against something like an Adachi or something like that. So it's a little unfortunate we don't have it. Maybe we should have milled more or something, but otherwise everything else about this waiting room does seem pretty good. So let's just go ahead and attack here. This is definitely going to crash, so we're going to reverse it. This is probably not going to crash, so we're going to keep this one alive for 2. I wish that was in our waiting room. And then we can attack with this one last because, again, it has hexproof, so not worried about any anti-change counter. And we don't trigger, which is really, really good for us. All right. So on our following turn, our opponent's going to trigger again. And let's just say that this time, most people have like the Adachi or something. So let's say we will have this removed. Bottom deck is pretty common, so let's just say we get this sent to our bottom deck. And unfortunately, because we don't have the runner to protect it, we're going to say that it goes to the bottom of our deck. So trigger here for 1. So this is the non-climax turn. Go ahead and take 1. Usually we want to level up the bonds starting from like level 2, because this bond is really useless when it comes to late game. And that's like not very good. So let's, oh, but actually that does level us up, which means we do keep the Meliodas. That's actually pretty funny. Yeah, so that is how that works. So all right, so let's see if we can take a 2 here. Ooh, we do take the 2. That's not very good. And then see if we take the 1 here. We do take the 1. I do want to see some healers if we can. Being level 3 already here is not great for us. Alright, this dies. That is fine. Go ahead and stand and draw. Oh, we drew the climax. Wait, that's super good. Okay, all we need now is to get more 3/2 Meliodas. Okay, so obviously we don't want to clock here because we are a stall deck. Let's see if we can... actually, maybe we... No, it doesn't really matter. I was thinking we could play this to see what we can draw, but we're going to get both cards anyways if we do this correctly. So let's play this first. Discard always here because we have the climax, so we don't need to reveal. So discard, draw first. Oh, we're so good at the game. All right, and then top check on the second one. Add that to our hand. Of course we will. Get this one. Go ahead and play this to heal. Excellent, excellent. Oh, I do want to brainstorm because I want to get more cards into our hand. Ideally, we can just get some really good stuff off of this brainstorm here. Actually, a bit of a misplay. I should have brainstormed first before playing the 3-2 Meliodas to, because I just paid out a bunch of stock for no reason. But, you know, whoops. All right, brainstorm. Do we hit 1 or 2? We hit 2, so top check 3, add 1 twice. So yeah, if I didn't play the Meliodas first, I wouldn't, you know, my deck would be a lot better. Oh my gosh, we get another Meliodas. We get triple. We're so good at this game. All right, going back with 6. We still haven't paid the climax out from all the way at the beginning of the game, but as you can see, it's not really that big of a deal. Like we're gonna go into triple Meliodas turn with double counters, and it's very unlikely that our opponent is gonna be able to kill us on the swing back. And just having that much stock meant that we were never really in danger of like not having the right resources to do what we want there. That's pretty good. All right, go ahead and refresh point, and then we can do the second brainstorm. Bruh. I swear, we've refreshed climax 3 times this test game. Why does this keep happening to me? What is going on? All right, second top check 3. We don't want that. Oh, we do want this one though. This is gonna be really good for any follow-up turn. We can double salvage Meliodas. That's like a huge thing that this deck can do. Go ahead and heal the climax off. And we don't really have anything else to do here but to play the combo. All right, so we play the combo. Full board. They get the revenge burn effect. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So first check. All right, the healer. We do want that eventually. Trigger standby here. Unfortunately, there's really nothing that good to standby. I will standby out the 1/1 runner just in case. Shenanigans, I guess. But yeah, otherwise not really anything good there. And the last trigger, a 2/1 counter. All right, so at this point, our opponent is probably going to be on their finishing turn. And generally speaking, the finishing turn that I like to test against is Marin, because Marin is a very easy and very fair finishing turn. Just burn 2 and then direct for front for 3, burn 2, front for 3. However, since we're playing Meliodas, we're just going to assume that our opponents cannot burn. So they're just going to do 3/3/3 here, and we do have the counters for that. So very excited to see what our opponent's going to trigger. So if they trigger, it's for 4, we're not going to counter. If it's for 3, we're probably going to counter. So the first one is going to be trigger for 3. We're going to go ahead and counter on this one to reduce the damage to 1. Because I do not want to take 3 if I don't have to. Take the 1. All right. On the next one is going to be for 3. And on this one, we're actually going to take it because it's going to take... If we cancel this one, we're going to be at 3/3, which is good. And if we take it, we're going to be at 3/6, which means that, you know, we will know to not use the counter. But let's say if we use the counter here and we take 1 and the final swing's a 3, then we're actually not in a good place. Whereas, you know, if we don't cancel, then we also just don't use the counter on the next one. So counter on the first one just because we can. It's just an easy one to use. And then the second one we don't. So let's see if we cancel this. Perfect. So now even if he triggers a soul trigger here for lethal, we know we can counter so that we're guaranteed not to die. So trigger, as you can see here, he has a soul trigger, but we know that we can prevent the lethal. By the way, I forgot to pay for the revenge burn. So let's just do that real quick. Completely forgot for that. So pay 3 for revenge burn. And now because we know that 4 is lethal, but we save the counter, we can go ahead and discard this and only take 2. Perfect. All right, so that's the way you kind of counter with this deck. If you have 2 counters, counter early on a profitable swing, and then counter late to avoid dying. So now, generally speaking, you know, our Meliodas are not going to die. But let's just assume that the one that we didn't counter for dies, just to, you know, be a little bit more fair. And then let's go ahead and draw for turn. Can we draw a climax here? Because if we can draw a climax, then we can swap it back to the choice climax and potentially get some extra burn damage here. So we're gonna clock, see if we can draw a climax. We did not draw a climax, unfortunately, and unfortunately we only have 3 stock, which means that we can't salvage like we can't salvage something that can what do you call it, a healer, but we can salvage a card that draws. So let's go ahead and top check here. It's level 1, so we don't want that, and we do want to salvage a card that can draw. So let's on play, we'll pay 2, we'll salvage the Elaine. And then we're going to play over the 1/0 lane. So a bunch of effects trigger. We're going to use this one first to top check. That's not a climax, so we're going to mill it to the waiting room. Then we're going to use this first effect to reveal top. That is a climax, and we're going to go ahead and discard this to draw the climax. And finally, we're going to play this over the Elaine. Pay 1. Swap the climax back for the choice. And we can top check 2 here. Top check 2. We know one of them's a soul trigger and one of them's empty, so we can just do something like this. And this is probably going to live, so we can use this to run around, and we have another turn of climax. And so by doing this, one of the really cool things you can do with this kind of setup is, obviously we're going to attack with this one first, and then this one second. And then now if we trigger standby here, we actually can standby out another Meliodas, but since we didn't, what's a really cool thing about this board setup is that you're going to have to force your opponent to attack your 1/1 first, because these other lanes have the revenge burn too. So if they front here first, let's say they're at like 3-5, we can actually kill them before they can kill us potentially. However, because they have to front this 1/1 first, we can run this to the lane where fronting it is the least beneficial for our opponent. So preferably a lane where they can't like just side for a 1 or something like that. So that's kind of cool. And obviously I don't think we have any climaxes left. No, we had 2 left, so probably dead here though, 3-6. So if we didn't kill our opponent at this point, then we have probably lost. But that was a really good game. Honestly, getting up to this point, just a really fantastic setup. We hit level 2. We hit 2-0 really cleanly, and that was able to get us our 3-2 Meliodas out. Unfortunately, we didn't have a runner there, because generally speaking, if you have the runner, you can run it up immediately and then just start applying a lot of board pressure. But we did get the 3-2 out and then the 2-1 the turn afterwards. And afterwards, it's really easy to snowball the board and deny our opponent damage and just kind of win the game from there. So hopefully this was a great example to for you guys to see how I would play this deck. Obviously didn't play it perfectly. There's a few moments there where I kind of misplayed, did something stupid. But yeah, hopefully that's a just good reference for you guys to learn from and check out for yourself. So if you haven't tried this deck, highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Really unique kind of deck with some really unique cards. Yeah, so that's it for this video. If you like this new series, just let me know if I should keep doing this, if this is helpful or useful. I would love that kind of feedback. It just gives me a lot of ideas to work with, or just, yeah, knowing if I'm going the right direction as a content creator or not. So that's it for this time. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace!